Well, hello there, friends, and welcome back to Royalty USA. I am Lina, your royal news reporter, and oh my goodness, do I have a cup of tea for you today that is so hot, so absolutely steaming with drama and humor and family tension and royal intrigue that I almost do not know where to begin. But I am going to begin right at the most extraordinary moment because sometimes a story has one detail at its center that is so perfectly jaw-dropping that everything else has to be arranged around it. That detail is four words that President Donald Trump of the United States of America reportedly leaned over and said to a British guest during King Charles's state visit to Washington. Four words that have now made headlines on both sides of the Atlantic. Four words that managed to be simultaneously funny and pointed and a little bit awkward and entirely completely on brand for Donald Trump all at once. Those four words were, can you take him back? Him being Prince Harry. Now, before we unpack every layer of this magnificent story, and there are many layers, friends, many delicious layers, let me start at the very beginning because there is important context here, and I want you to have all of it because this story is not just about one joke at a state visit. It is about a long and complicated and genuinely fascinating relationship between Donald Trump and Prince Harry that has been simmering for years, and that boiled over in a very interesting way during what was supposed to be one of the most carefully orchestrated diplomatic weeks of the year. Let us go back just a few days before King Charles arrived in Washington. Just before King Charles's state visit to the United States, Prince Harry made a comment about American leadership while speaking at the Kyiv Security Forum in Ukraine on April the 23rd, just days before his estranged father's trip to America. Now Harry did not name Trump directly. He was speaking about the ongoing war in Ukraine and the role that the United States could and should be playing in supporting that country. But the timing was, shall we say, independent and not ideal. His father was about to land in Washington for the most important royal diplomatic visit in nearly 20 years, and his son was in Ukraine making pointed remarks about American leadership that everyone in Washington knew were directed at the current administration. Trend hunter Trump acted like he did not really care about what Harry had to say, but a recent report suggests otherwise. Because according to the Daily Mail, something happened during the private moments of King Charles's visit to the White House that tells a rather different story. Trump reportedly joked to a British visitor about the Duke of Sussex, saying, "Can you take him back?" That is according to the Daily Mail, which reported that Trump loved hosting Charles and Queen Camilla this week, despite his apparent dislike of the estranged Duke of Sussex. Trend hunter CNN, "Can you take him back?" said to a British guest, while the father of the man in question was sitting right there in the White House as an official state guest. Friends, I have been covering the royal family for a long time, and I do not think I have ever heard anything quite like that. It is audacious, it is brazen, it is, depending entirely on your perspective, either very funny or deeply inappropriate, or possibly both at exactly the same time. Now, I want to be fair here, as I always try to be at Royalty USA. We do not know exactly when during the visit this remark was made or precisely to whom. We do not know whether King Charles heard it or whether it reached his ears through other channels. We do not know whether Trump said it with genuine irritation or whether it was the kind of offhand joke that he makes constantly without particularly meaning it to land heavily. What we do know is that it was said, and it was reported, and now the whole world is talking about it. And here's the part of this story that I think is the most genuinely fascinating from a royal watching perspective. It has been said that King Charles does not exactly love the way his estranged son has commented on the Trump administration. Think about that for a moment. King Charles, who worked so hard to make this state visit a success, who crossed the Atlantic and gave a historic speech to Congress and attended a magnificent state dinner and laid a wreath at Arlington Cemetery. King Charles was trying to repair and strengthen the relationship between Great Britain and the United States. That was the entire point of the visit, and his own son from Ukraine was making public statements that were undermining that diplomatic effort before it had even properly begun. trend hunter. So when Trump leaned over and said, "Can you take him back?" as pointed and as blunt as that remark was, there is a small and uncomfortable possibility that King Charles, privately, might have had at least a tiny moment of understanding exactly what Trump meant. Not agreement, not endorsement, but understanding. Because nobody knows better than King Charles how complicated it is to love someone who keeps making things harder than they need to be. Now, I want to give you some background on the Trump and Harry relationship because it is a long and winding road and it adds so much color to this story. Trump's negative feelings about Harry and his wife Meghan Markle go back years. They go back to before Harry and Meghan moved to America. They go back to comments Meghan made during Trump's first campaign. They intensified when Harry and Meghan gave their famous Oprah interview. They deepened further when Harry's memoir came out and contained details that Trump found, to put it mildly, unflattering to the institution of the American presidency. And they have continued right up through this week with Harry in Ukraine making comments about American leadership while his father was trying to have a friendly state dinner in Washington. And yet, and here's where the story gets even more interesting, the Daily Mail also reported that Prince William and his wife Catherine have been invited to travel to Washington. William and Kate, invited to the White House. After everything that has happened this week, after the historic state visit, after King Charles's speech to Congress, after the warm relationship that developed between Trump and the royal family during these 4 extraordinary days, the next chapter may well be the Prince and Princess of Wales coming to America. And friends, if that happens, Royalty USA is going to have the most magnificent content you have ever seen in your life. CNN. But let us come back to Harry for a moment because I want to make sure I am being fair to him too. Because Harry is a complicated figure, and his situation is genuinely difficult, and I think it deserves more than just a punchline. Here is a man who gave up everything. His titles in practical terms, his place in the working royal family, his life in Britain, his relationship with his father and his brother, for a different kind of life, a life he chose. And he is living that life in America and speaking his mind about things he cares about, including the war in Ukraine, which by any measure is a worthy cause to speak up for. The timing of his Ukraine comments was awkward, and the diplomatic fallout was real. But the cause itself, supporting a country fighting for its survival, is not something anyone should be criticized for championing. The problem is not what Harry said. The problem is when he said it and the position it put his father in, and that tension in between a son who wants to use his voice and a father who needed him to be quiet for just 1 week, is the kind of family tension that millions of ordinary families across America and across the world understand in their own way. Most of us have a family member who says exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment. Most of us have been in a situation where someone we love made our life harder without meaning to. King Charles just has to navigate that same universal family experience on the world stage, with cameras everywhere and the future of British-American relations hanging in the balance, and then Trump makes a joke about it. Of course he does, because that is what Trump does. He takes the tension that everyone else is tiptoeing around, and he walks straight up to it and pokes it with a stick and grins. "Can you take him back?" said to a British guest, while the King of England is in the building. It is so Trump that it almost loops back around to being charming. Almost. Now I want to share with you one more piece of this story that I absolutely love, because it shows that King Charles gave as good as he got during this visit when it came to wit and humor. Because while Trump was making jokes about Harry, King Charles was making some rather pointed jokes of his own. At the white tie state dinner, King Charles gave Trump a genuine taste of his own medicine. Charles referenced previous comments by Trump aimed at European allies, saying, "You recently commented, Mr. President, that if it were not for the United States, European countries would be speaking German. Dare I say that if it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French." The room absolutely erupted. Even Trump laughed. Unofficial royalty. And Charles was not done. He made further jokes at Trump's expense, saying he could not help noticing the readjustments to the White House East Wing, which Trump has demolished to build a giant ballroom. Charles said, "I am sorry to say that we British, of course, made our own attempt at real estate redevelopment of the White House in 1814, when British soldiers burned the building down." He compared the state dinner to a considerable improvement on the Boston Tea Party. The King of England standing in the White House joking about the time Britain set it on fire. I mean, if that is not the most extraordinary evening of dinner conversation in modern diplomatic history, I truly do not know what is. Unofficial royalty. So while Trump was whispering, "Can you take him back?" about Harry, Charles was standing at a microphone telling Trump that without Britain, he would be speaking French. And both men were laughing. And somehow, through all of it, through the jokes and the protocol blunders and the Harry jokes and the burning, the White House jokes, a genuine warmth developed between these two very different leaders. And that warmth, that real human connection that formed over 4 days in Washington, may end up mattering a great deal for the relationship between two nations that very much need each other right now. The Daily Mail reported that Trump loved hosting Charles and Queen Camilla this week. Loved it, despite everything, despite the Harry tension, despite the protocol moments, despite the jokes flying in both directions across the dinner table. He loved it. And King Charles, by all accounts, left Washington having accomplished something genuinely significant, not just for the history books, but for the practical, day-to-day relationship between Britain and America going forward. CNN. And Harry? Harry is still in America, still making statements, still living his chosen life. And somewhere in a White House corridor, Donald Trump reportedly leaned over to a British guest and asked if they could take him back. And the whole world laughed and shook its head and reached for its cup of tea. That is the royal family, friends. Never a dull moment, never a simple story, always another layer, always more tea in the pot. Thank you so much for being here with me today at Royalty USA. I am Lina, your royal news reporter, and every single one of you who joins me here means the absolute world. If this video gave you something to talk about at the dinner table tonight, please give it a big thumbs up and share it with someone who loves royal news as much as you do. And if you are not yet subscribed to Royalty USA, please hit that red button right now because we have so much more coming and I want you here for every single drop of it. Leave me a comment below. What do you think about Trump's "can you take him back" joke? Was it funny or did it go too far? And what do you think about William and Kate possibly coming to Washington? I want to know everything. I read every single comment. Until next time, God save the king. God bless America. This is Lina, and Royalty USA will see you very soon, darlings.